Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Policy and Curriculum Committee of the Portland Public Schools. It's March 9th, and we are meeting with our Superintendent, Malia Nally, and Co-Superintendent Aaron Townsend will be joining us a little bit later for his pieces of the agenda. I did want to just mention, I'm Aura Russell Better, District 4 board member and chair of the committee. I know board member Mickey Bondo wasn't able to join us tonight because of another commitment, but maybe just because, Julie, is this the first meeting that you're joining, or no, you've had a,
no,
we haven't been together for a little while. Yeah, it was the last one. Okay. But maybe we could just say hello because we have a staff person join just briefly, and then we could jump into the agenda. Would that be all right? Just to do a brief little go around. Yeah. Do you want to start, Sarah? And we have
Sure. I can start. I'm Sarah Lentz. My pronouns are she, hers, and I am remembering what hat I'm wearing right now. I've been in Zoom meetings all day. I'm chair of the school board and also at-large representative, and I'll pass it to Nyla.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm Nyla. I'm an at-large representative, and I live in Portland. Julianne, sorry.
That's fine. Julianne Opperman, Doc Op, and I'm District 3 representative.
I'll chime in. I'm Malia Nally, interim co-superintendent, she, her pronouns, and I'll pass it to Cindy, who's joining us from our academics team.
Hi, I'm Cindy Soul, literacy teacher leader, she, her pronouns, and I'm happy to be here tonight.
Great.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And it looks like we're going to just put off approving minutes from our last meeting to the next meeting. So I'll just flag that we have a couple of things on the agenda. And Superintendent Nally was going to start us out with a preview of some curriculum investments just prior to starting the budget process in the coming weeks. So she's going to do a little overview about that, and then we'll move to some of our policy pieces when Superintendent Townsend joins us. So thank you, Superintendent Nally, and take it away.
Great. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. I have children with children over in the background trying to play quiet sports. So if it is distracting, if somebody can give me a wink or a thumb so I can mute and scream at them, that'd be great. Not really, but sort of. So just wanted to caveat that so there's no awkward moments. But yeah, so it's great to see you all. Excited to talk about this. I'm going to share my screen here in a second, but we have alluded to some of the literacy curriculum work that has been starting to get planned at the district, across the district, but haven't actually had a conversation with you all about that. And it will show up as a key investment in the budget. And we always try to have conversation with the board, either through focus on educational issues or in committee meetings pertaining to any, more significant investments. And so we're getting this in under the wire. But there was a reason for that. We are trying to be really thoughtful about our process for coming to a decision and thinking about the implementation that involves our coaches, our administrators, and teachers. And so we were kind of trepidatious about getting it out of front in front of that process and talking publicly with you all about this work without having done what we want to do internally, especially with teachers, to be really thoughtful about that. So we are still in process. So just to be transparent about that, but just trying to help you understand why it's like, oh, the couple days before the budget, but also mindful of what we're going to talk about tonight is still a work in progress with our teachers. And we're trying to honor the process because that's super important for setting us up for successful implementation. Does that make sense to everybody? Are you following me? Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can everybody see the screen now? Yeah. Okay. And Jesse Robinson, who's our Director of Curriculum Instruction, is planning to join us as well. Cindy, if she has trouble getting in, just flag it for me, but she'll be here at any moment. She was making a last-minute babysitter arrangement in order to join us. So our goals are to build understanding of our move to adopt high-quality ELA curriculum materials aligned to our instructional vision, and then to just briefly preview the investment needs for FY24 budget as it pertains to this ELA curriculum. This is some just quick research. We've shared this multiple times with curriculum committees in the past, so some of you might have seen this before, but we're cognizant of having new folks too. So this is some of the research we've leaned on when kind of thinking about our strategy around core instruction. This is called the opportunity myth, and if you haven't read it, I would recommend it. But as you can see here, and these are just plucked data points from a much larger research synthesis. But basically, 94% of students surveyed in this larger research piece said college was part of their plan. And so kids have big goals is sort of the takeaway, but most students are doing what they're asked to do in school, but they still don't wind up prepared for getting into and succeeding in college. And so they were looking at assignments. And one of their big findings was that students were succeeding on most of their assignments, 71%, but then only met grade level standards 17% of the time. So there's a mismatch if they're doing well on their assignments, but they're actually not meeting standards on kind of normed assessments. What's the disconnect there? And then as they looked at that and disaggregated that, students of color and from low-income families and English language learners and those with mild to moderate disabilities have even less access to these resources than their peers. And so in their study, they were 4 times as many high quality, classrooms with mostly white students tended to have nearly 4 times as many high quality lessons as evaluated by their criteria. And then in other research, some of you might have listened to the podcast Sold a Story. I was going to look here, just give a thumbs up if you've listened to it. I'm just curious. Sarah, I know you have, Cindy, not Aura, and I don't see Julie or Nylat. So something that we can share with you all, but yeah, Julie, you have, okay. So it's, definitely very popular right now and has kind of gained steam, and it's pertaining to the science of reading. So basically, this is old research, but it just was not out there as much, and it is partially connected to some dynamics in the curriculum market. But basically, the gist is that there was this emphasis on balanced literacy, where the teaching of literacy was really done in components in isolation, like my reading block, my writing block. And there was a strong emphasis on student level and autonomy. So kids were really getting their just right book, but only being exposed to their current level, which helped contribute to the knowledge gap, because maybe you're below grade level in reading, so you're never getting access to more complex text and more complex ideas. And so it's hard to ever close the gap if that's all you're getting access to. As well as there is a lack of emphasis on systematic phonics instruction. And so there's research that says, about 60% of students need systematic instruction to learn to read, 40% don't. So, it is true that some kids can sit with books and figure it out, but majority of kids need that. And that's especially key for multilingual learners and many students with disabilities. And with all of this, there was a shift away from engaging content. So there was like this focus on learning to read versus reading to learn. So that's another piece of research that we've been, leaning on. And then students, we've talked about this before in the social studies realm and science in particular, but students have told us in various forums that their experiences that they have felt like their peer, when talking to friends, they are like, wait, you learned that? I didn't learn that. So just this difference in what kids are getting access to based on the school they go to and the teacher they happen to get. And so that all drives, what our priority is here. Again, this is, I hope, familiar to people on the curriculum committee who've been around for a while. But basically, the way we're focused on our achievement and equity goal is focusing on strengthening core instruction. And so we talk about a theory of action, right? So if you do this, then what do we expect to happen? And so for us, we think about making sure all students get exposed to relevant and engaging grade level learning with the appropriate supports and scaffolds. And if they are exposed, they're more likely to master it. And then on the inverse, if they're never exposed because they're either pulled out or aside or taught something different, or because the tasks don't actually align to grade level standards, then of course they're never going to learn on grade level. And so the strategies we've been working on are here. And the first one is pertaining to curriculum materials. And that is that we've been trying to build toward a coherent, high quality set of instructional materials and tasks across grade spans and content areas. And so here you see, we are coming to, since the launch of the Portland Promise, all of this work has been launched. And so at this point, we have an overarching instructional vision that sort of threads across all these content-specific instructional visions, which are linked. And we've shared them before, and if you're interested, I would love for you all to read these. But we have a math vision, and that vision, as well as materials and curriculum materials aligned to that vision. We have it for science. We have it for social studies, and we're still building it out. And then ELA is where we have the vision, but we don't have a clear set of curriculum materials aligned to that vision. And so in terms of our literacy vision, it has a lot of detail because our visions kind of give these broad guiding principles, and then they get into really specific, what we call in, kind of educational jargon speak, pedagogical look for. So things you sort of teacher actions, if you will, and then student look for. So things you'd expect and want to see students doing in a classroom. But the overarching principles in the literacy vision are that students are regularly engaging in inquiry. So asking questions, seeking information, and developing a lens of criticality. That they have abundant opportunities in many subject areas at each grade level to make sense of complex texts and challenging content through productive struggle. That they explore their identities and the experiences, histories, and viewpoints of others, and that they'll develop speaking, writing, reading, listening, communication, and visual literacy skills in all classrooms and content areas. And then in elementary, we have, if you all think about like the day, right? The schedule, like I come and I have a morning meeting and then I have a math class and then I have recess so in trying to think about that, we are thinking about the content-based literacy approach in elementary and trying to move in that direction. So that's an interconnected 3-part block where it's composed of what we call foundational skills. So that's like phonics, right? Like learning to read, like and then the literacy block where you're learning how to, find main idea and understand character development and write, etc. And then the interdisciplinary block is something we're really trying to move toward in our effort to have more of a experiential learning approach. And that's where what we're doing with social studies and science, there's an interconnectedness with that and the literacy block. So rather than like, now I'm in my reading class, now I'm in my social studies class, an effort to really have that be more coherent and integrated and experiential overall. So that's kind of what we're striving for. So where are we right now in terms of the materials and tools? So for foundational skills, in 2019, we did move to adopt phonics materials. So, before the podcast and everybody was talking about this, we were aware of the fact that we needed to have a consistent systematic phonics curriculum in general, and especially given our population. And so back then, the literacy coach team collaborated and came to the decision to adopt TC Phonics and Lively Letters. And then in 2022, we added these other programs you can see here that were filling holes that we kind of, as we got going, realized those other programs had. And so right now, I think we're really focused on the science of reading and kind of looking at how things are going with these other programs. There's new curriculum evaluation tools available that didn't exist before. So, like TC Phonics is rated red on those evaluation tools, whereas other components that we have up here listed are strongly rated. But there's also been feedback from educators that they're interested, and not all, just to be very clear, not everybody, but we have heard a theme that a lot of people want something that's more comprehensive and streamlined rather than all these different piecemeal parts. And we also are looking at what we need for a tier 2 intervention. So if the thing we give to all kids isn't working, then what are those additional things to get different types of practice and exposure? And a lot of these tools can be used as tier 2 intervention tools. And then in terms of our literacy block, it really varies by school. Lots of folks are using Teachers College Units of Study, which, if you've listened to the podcast, is something that they really critique in there, as well as the Fountas and Pinnell guided reading. So say that's kind of the most common that exists in our buildings. And then we have, Presumpscot using ELA. We have some IB work at Ocean. We have a bunch of teacher created stuff going on. So it really does vary. And then for the interdisciplinary block, we have available the Amplify Science, which has varied implementation at this point because it's newer. And then I think you're familiar with the fact that we've started rolling out the Wabanaki study. So 1 unit per grade this year. And then in terms of the future state, what we're striving for is in the foundational skills block, really having that comprehensive curriculum with embedded formative assessment. And so this is where, I'm going to be very clear in my caveats that we're still in process, but the program we're really honing in on to explore for that, and this is grades K through 2, is called CKLA. And if we kind of go for that, then we would maintain Lexia, which is one of those other programs for 3 through 5 grades. And then these other Hegarty and Lively letters for tier 2 interventions, as well as that early bird assessment as an interim assessment and dyslexia screener. I'm very self-conscious of the fact that I know I'm saying a bunch of blah, 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 blah words that if you're not Cindy, I'm sure you're on the edge of your seat with me, but everybody else. But I do want to also, there's some jargon in here. These are a bunch of names of tools that if you don't know them, probably don't mean a lot, but I still think I'm just trying to be transparent with it is fairly technical. And so I'm trying to keep it pretty high level, but just wanted to acknowledge that you might be thinking that as I talk quickly through this. And then in the literacy block, we would love to have one high quality ELA curriculum that as a system we invest in and give to teachers. Again, we see this as respectful of teachers' professionalism to provide them with high quality research-based tools. And so there's a lot of interest in the ELA. So that's the Expeditionary Learning ELA curriculum. So to be clear, not going toward all EL model schools, but rather their curriculum for ELA. We recently adopted that in the middle schools. So that's really nice too, in terms of coherence. And because Presumpscot's been using it for a while, there's a lot of great learning we've been able to have around that integration in the interdisciplinary block. So that's where a lot of the momentum is headed, but again, still in process. And then the interdisciplinary blocks, ultimately at full implementation, we'd have 3 social studies and 3 science units per grade. By the way, this Scarborough's rope over here, talk about jargon. I'm definitely not going to go deep there unless folks are interested, and then I'll punt it to you, Cindy. But just that's the kind of lots more detail about what we're striving for in terms of our approach to literacy as compared to what I was saying before with the balanced literacy. So then just how are we thinking about this? So we try to have a really clear, rigorous process for curriculum adoption. When we've done different content areas, they've kind of been slightly different, partly because of the content. There's some contextual differences, partly because I think we keep learning and getting better. But for this review of trying to figure out what we're going to do, we considered 4 broad inputs, if you will. So 1, we're looking at, is the curriculum standards aligned? Does it have embedded assessment? And does it have differentiation for students learning English and students with disabilities baked into it. And we use EdReports as a tool for that, which is kind of a nonprofit that does this kind of review of curriculum, which is awesome that they weren't around for the foundational skills stuff when we did the initial phonics adoption. They were around, but we didn't have reports on that. And then for the comprehensive foundational skills block, they have a review of those programs. So we're using EdReports there. And these are kind of first gates, if you will. Like, it has to be a green rated program in order for us to say, let's look more deeply at it. And so if we get it through those first gates, then we're looking really deeply at cultural responsiveness. And for that, we use our instructional vision and internal review teams. So here you see a very teeny tiny snapshot of an example of the review. And if interested, I can pull out and kind of scan through the big document. But basically, our criteria was pulled from our literacy vision and our social studies vision. So looking at this concept of windows and mirrors, which we can elaborate on, diverse representation, critical questioning, including directly addressing oppression and power, and whether or not things are driven by inquiry, cultural humility. There's a multiplicity of perspectives, not just one white Eurocentric dominant perspective. And then, it goes on, and I'm just right now reading from that little criteria over there. So then a group of people is looking at these texts and then making notes and going literally unit by unit, grade by grade to review. And so, for example, we had one that we were pretty excited about. It was rated green on EdReports, super strong on all of those things that are listed there for EdReports. But then when we looked at it, we just, it was too much yellow and red. And so, of course, always we know we're going to have to do some adaptation, but it was too much. Actually, Denver had adopted this one that I'm thinking of, and they had a similar thing. So they actually didn't even have particular units sent out, but we felt like it went beyond just sort of slicing out a couple of units. So anyway, so that's a part of the process. And then we're looking at the potential for that integration with our interdisciplinary block. So we're using our social studies and science scope and sequence to not have it line up perfectly yet, but to say, okay, could this work together as we move toward that content-based literacy approach? And so then for a process, we establish that criteria for vetting our curriculum. We narrow down the options. We review each option with multiple stakeholders, curriculum team, literacy team, teachers, administrative team. On the teachers, I want to note that at the sort of narrowing down phase, we did just some representatives, for example, on our ELA team, where some work at the building level, but, and different people have different perspectives on this, but some of the feedback we got is it's like, people just want clarity and they want to really weigh in on the implementation, but like having all these conversations about what to do when we have this clear criterion, like we have people who have the time to do some of that work, like that's helpful, but then let teachers really weigh in on like, okay, does this recommendation work? And like, how would this work? So that's really where we're going even deeper with teacher input. We talked a lot as an admin and coach team about, do we need to have consistency in materials across sites? And then we select the material and pending an implementation analysis. So that's where we're at right now. Like the ones I mentioned, that's what we're thinking, but we're doing this implementation deep dive to make sure it can actually work in an actual classroom. And so we're doing that now. We've been doing some teacher conversations with coaches, but then we're also hosting some district conversations around that. And then we start to make our decision and plan backward. So given all of that, we are looking at these investments. So partial investments here, which you can see on the slide. This wouldn't get us all the way to full scale. And so originally we had that proposed, thinking about trying to use ESSER for why we have it. It's really good to like, it's a one-time cost. I mean, there's recurring costs, but I will say that literacy curriculum is extra expensive as compared to math because of all the books. And so that's where it's been our strategy and hope to leverage ESSER for that, which we, when we come forward Tuesday, you'll see that we are doing that, but we are not going full in on this. And it's a little bit more reflective of sort of some preliminary sense from schools about what they think they actually want to implement next year. So Cindy, what did I miss and all that before I pull us out for questions?
I think you did a fabulous job.
Thanks.
Yeah, I didn't make any notes.
Okay. All right. Well, then let me, why don't we move to questions, and then let me stop sharing. There we go. Yeah. And Cindy's here. So,
and Jesse's trying to get in. I don't know. She found the link and she's trying to get in. So I don't know if somebody has to admit her.
Oh,
she's in attendees. I don't know, Malia, are you able to move her over? I don't think I have.
Yes, I think I just did that. She should be coming. I promoted her. Okay. There she is. Hi, Jesse.
Sorry about that.
No, I'm sorry. I usually Erin drives the Zoom thing. So welcome. I just finished talking things through, so we're just opening it up for question and answer. So I don't know, or if you want to manage it, or if I'm happy to facilitate that too. So
I'm happy to. I don't see anybody yet. Yeah, so just let me know, members. Oh, okay, there we go. Shared Lunch has one. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if you could go into more detail about like how you think about implementation, like what you said you're doing, like a study, like what does that look like across the district? Like who's involved and how is it evaluated?
Yeah. Okay. So I want to pull up that document we just used today with the literacy team. I will say a high level thing, but then Jesse and Cindy, why don't you jump in? Because you've really been thinking about this, but so what I meant by that, I mean, one, we look at implementation science and stuff like that, but what we're doing right now with this process is really trying to flesh out like at a practical level. Okay, what does this look like in an actual schedule? What does this look like across the year? And so we've got various scenarios, because that's where like principals and teachers are like, wait, so how's this going to work? Like, it all sounds fine and dandy, but like, what about the fact that you're telling me it's this many hours, but it actually takes 15 minutes to put on snow boots? So that's minus 15 minutes from my day, so on and so forth. So we have been working with the literacy coaches and some different school teams to get some options. And then we're looking at those and having folks kind of really think through what makes sense to them. So there's like how would this actually look now? And then there's also the question of how might I want to roll it out? So some schools are super eager to jump on the comprehensive foundational skills program, and others feel like they're seeing some growth and gains. People aren't ready to just throw out the TC Phonics right away. So we're really trying to empower school teams to look at their data, to look at their context, and to make some choices. Now we actually have the full picture for them. So those are some things I'd say, but Jesse and Cindy, you two have been leading like a much more detailed process with coaches, administrators, and teachers. So I'd kick it to you.
Well, I guess one thing I'd add is just like the tension between doing something consistent, right? We know like it's really important to have coherence and consistency so that kids, when they go between schools, they have similar experiences. And then like the middle school teachers know what to expect. All the kids have had the same thing. So the tension is like between consistency and coherence, and then like having schools do their own thing, because we've found that if we dictate that, it's you don't see the same kind of results as if a school leader who really knows their teachers is listening to the teachers every day, is getting input on a consistent basis. So if they lead the charge, then it goes way better. So that's kind of the tension that we're working with, and it's been a little, it's taken us some time to kind of figure that balance out, but I'm feeling good about this implementation in that way, because I feel like we're kind of striking a good balance there.
And I would just add that the literacy coaching team has been doing an amazing job in their grade level team meetings, listening to teachers about what's going really well in their classrooms and making connections to the curriculum options that we're looking at so that they can see the bridge between what they're feeling success with, and also really naming what isn't going well and how some of this would help support. And I think that clarity of what it can be in their classroom, and also knowing that there would, I think one of the things that teachers are asking for is really clear collaborative time. It's something we're really working to build, is the collaboration between general education, ESOL teachers, and special education teachers. And as you know, the school day is very busy. And so really trying to honor that as we make this shift. That's another piece we're thinking about very carefully, is how to listen to that and provide that time for educators to collaborate in the ways that we know is going to make an impact in the classroom.
Is that good, Chair Lentz, for your question? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, Member Opperman, go ahead.
Hi. On the line, I'm glad, Jesse, what you say is happening, because that's critical. Having done this, trying to work with curriculum and curriculum changes. In the new programs, is there enough variety and inclusion of maybe some of the older, particularly the literature block, of things that teachers may be very familiar with already that might, I don't know, when you're buying books and multiple packets for the literacy piece, what's in that? I mean, is it all new stuff? Is it old stuff? Can teachers want to put their own flavor on whatever is going on in that? What's going on in that piece? That was part of it. And the other one is, I haven't looked at Amplify Science. I'm glad you were doing content area. Trust me, absolutely. I did some work with some elementary teachers who did Write Science. I don't know if you've seen that program at all, which is basically using science to learn how to write and argue. I'm not proposing that. What you've got is what you've got, but I'm pleased with that. But how much of this is imposition and coaches check on what's going on, that people are following what's going on, or coaches encouraging and saying you have options for inclusion, particularly each class is different. So I don't know if that's clear enough a question.
I have an interpretation of it. So how about if we try to answer and then you can say. So the first one, Cindy, did you capture that? Do you want to speak to that one?
Yes. So there are two different components. The skills component with CKLA is really phonics, phonemic awareness. And so that the K-2 is really, and handwriting. And so those things are fairly consistently, they're a scripted thing because it just goes in a systematic way. That's the whole science of reading research. But there is a lot of joy in it. I recently attended a webinar, and I was so excited to see the ways like students were like air writing and chanting together and choral saying things. So, and the phonemic awareness piece is really joyful too. It's like cup, cake, take away cup, what's left, cake. And they're doing this with their hands. So it's very kinesthetic. And then the really nice piece that would be an addition is decodable text. There's a lot of research out there. So it builds that automaticity and fluency where they can put the phonemes together into graphemes. So phoneme sound, graphemes print, and it's really awesome. And so the skills that they're learning, they'll be practicing the letters in handwriting and then reading the skills in the decodable text, and they're specifically designed to go with that. Now, that's not to say that we love read alouds, right? I can list off all my favorite read alouds, and that's where teacher creativity comes in, because we still want students exposed to complex text. And so the EL units, that's more the knowledge side. And so you're exposing students to complex text. I was just over at Talbot School where some fourth grade teachers wanted to try it. They were so excited about this. They're like, can we try it? Like, great, let's do it. And so we unpacked, they're planning. it's a lot, and they're rocking it. And one of the teachers or actually two of the teachers are brand new, one veteran teacher, and it's going really well. That centers around a poetry book that's Love That Dog. And the students then are writing their own poetry. And so that's where that teacher creativity comes in. EL is a thinking teacher's curriculum, and it involves the unpacking. And there are certain components that are going to be consistent, but those other things that are involved with independent reading and the things that we elementary teachers will stand on a hill and fight for there's still opportunity for that. So I'm happy to talk to you about Amplify Science, because even though I'm a literacy person, science is was another true passion of mine. Literacy led me to science. So I'm happy to meet with you and go over Amplify Science too, if you would like that.
Thank you, Cindy. And then I just want to start on that second part of your question, Member Opperman, and then I'm sure Cindy and Jesse would chime in because they work closest with their coaches. But I think what I heard in your question, Julie, is around, so what's the approach with coaches? Are they monitoring, or are they sort of supporting? How much autonomy do teachers have in the implementation and use of this work? Is that the gist of what you were kind of getting at? Ish. Okay. So I'll start, and then you can ask follow up. But I think that, yeah, I mean, so we're trying to move toward a coaching model called student-centered coaching. And this is Diane Sweeney's work. So she does this framework of I'm doing a circle in the air because I think that way. So I'm picturing it right now, but she does the circle where she talks about resource-based coaching, teacher-centered coaching, and student-centered coaching. And so the resource is like kind of like the coach that like does some copies for you, gets you a book, gets you some stuff. And that's helpful. That's actually a great way for building relationships, but it doesn't necessarily drive impact, but it does feel good to teachers, is kind of what we talk about. Then there's the teacher-centered coaching, and that's kind of, your classic, like watching the teacher, giving them feedback, maybe using a rubric. And that some teachers love, and depending on the relationship and the culture can be really powerful, but some people hate and can feel like that evaluative, like person in the back of the room. And so that's the teacher-centered coaching. And then there's, in the middle of this circle bullseye, student-centered coaching. And that's where the coach is sort of links arm in arm with the teacher and starts with a goal that that the teacher has. And they're figuring out, okay, like this group of students, is not writing in this way or whatever. And they set the goal together. They figure out what are they going to do. And then, sometimes the coach is modeling and the teacher is watching. Sometimes it's the other way. They're planning together. They're looking at the data. So it's really that collaborative process. Yes. So that's what we're striving for. Diane Sweeney, the author of that work, came and trained our coaches on that. So I would not say we're kind of at full implementation on that. Cindy and Jesse would know more, but that's the model now. And then we're in different places. So, and then what I would just want to say to this group too, because this comes up when we're talking about outcomes, is a tension that we've been grappling with that has gotten even more complicated by this big interruption of the pandemic, is that is the component of kind of monitoring implementation, because we have this vision, we're making these choices to adopt these research-based tools, and so we need to know, are people doing it? Are they doing it with the intended spirit? And I say that rather than fidelity, because people have weird feelings about fidelity. And then is it getting the result? And if we don't know if it's happening, and if we don't know, and it might be happening, but if it's not happening the way it's intended, then it's hard to interpret the outcome. And so we have tended to try to do that implementation monitoring. And every time we've sort of attempted to move in that direction, we're backing up because of feedback, because, of that dynamic. And so I just want that to be transparent to you all, we would like to do that, but it can land in ways that we get a lot of pushback on. And so that's something we're trying to kind of really figure out how to do well. And I think to Jesse's point about this literacy curriculum point, even we keep learning, right, how to do those adoption processes better. And so I think we're all feeling better than ever about how this process is playing out. And so I'm hopeful that we can manage that student-centered coaching with that implementation management. But, that can be tricky. So.
Well, understandable. I think it's about relationships and the coach and all. And, sometimes it works and people are people, but student-centered is modeled as fabulous. I just think that's fantastic. If nobody else has a question, I'm going to ask another one.
I do have one quick one, Julie, and I'm thinking we probably need to wrap up to move.
Oh, yeah. I got cheap about this.
Oh, I have a question after.
Oh, yeah. I just quickly, Superintendent Nally, you could probably just, I'm guessing, give me a quick answer to this one. When you mentioned that, I think Early Bird was the dyslexia screener when you mentioned, is that brand new? Like, have we had something else that's done that screening? I was just curious what has.
That's what we started this year.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Cindy and Jesse.
East End and Talbot tried it out last year and full this year.
Okay. So it is
K1 and then it will be 2 next year.
Gotcha. So right now it's being used K1, but that is a newer, like we hadn't had an official before the last year. Okay, great. Thank you. Member Bilio, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you tell me the process of how y'all find new curriculum or new curriculum to adopt and what that process looks like?
Yeah. So I could share, hold on one second, my screen again. Sorry. Here. Can you see this, Nyla?
Yeah.
Hold on. Sorry. Okay. So we kind of start with looking at, so Ed Reports is that nonprofit I mentioned that reviews curriculum, and they have their criteria. So that's one, of course, we're hearing stuff, right? We're all reading like what's happening in education and the research and the publications we get. We talk to other districts, et cetera. So that just happens naturally. But then Ed Reports is a place where we look to figure out what is rated green on the criteria that they have. And that helps us narrow in, along with what we know and what we've been reading, into things that we would want to explore further. And then once we do that, then we start to look more deeply at cultural responsiveness. And I can maybe try to quickly pull up, because Cindy, we had this, here's an example of a review for one of these where green meets the criteria, yellow is adaptable. So it's not great, but we could modify it, and red is unadaptable. And so you can see we go through, and here's the criteria. I don't know if you can see this well, but these are pulled from our instructional vision. So these concepts of the windows and mirrors, the diverse representation, et cetera. And so then we kind of hone in on that. And then we start to, and then we have a bunch of notes about that. One of the things too, sorry, I'm going to try to stop sharing, is as we go deeper, then we will, we're trying to make sure we have people whose identities are match whatever kind of theme or topic the unit or the books is about, do the reviewing. So Jesse, I think maybe you could tell about, for the example in middle school, I forgot what the unit or what the book was, but I think
So we did kind of like a broad sort of review, like Malia was talking about, for the units that we're using in middle school, which is the same curriculum as this K-5. So that was one module this year. And one of the kind of like red flags that came up was that there was a book about the Sudan, but it was written by a Chinese American woman. And so sort of like, is that okay? And that is something that maybe the people that were on the original review didn't know the answer to. So we reached out to the South Sudanese community in Portland. We had, I think, 3 or 4 members join, and some wrote in, and we talked about it. We invited some teachers that were going to be implementing that unit or that module, and so kind of got to the folks from the community, got to read the book, and we kind of talked about that particular question, and in general, like, should we even teach this book? What's your experience? What's your take on this? And overwhelmingly, they said that yes, we should teach the book. But the caveat was that like we didn't want students to come away with like the idea that everything in Africa is a war-torn country, that, you know, where students experience that same thing everywhere. So like that was really the worry. And so we built in an additional sort of piece into it about the danger of a single story. And so teachers are using that in addition to the module this year. So that's kind of one of the adaptations that we made, but collectively, like not wanting one single person to be making those adaptations, but rather really leaning on community members to help us make those decisions, and then doing that across the board.
Does that get that, like how we kind of start broad and narrow down, and then...
I'm a bit triggered by what just happened. I'm South Sudanese, and I don't know who you guys talk to in terms of our community members, but I think there is a lot that just came up for me with that, in the concept of like most of our community members are older immigrants that haven't assimilated into community, so they don't even understand the concept of writing your own stories and being the one to structure what those stories are. And I think, and like, I'm somebody that, you know, has professionally worked in this, in white spaces. And I just don't feel like they're even equipped to really understand what the implication of that is. And that actually perfectly goes into my question of like, yeah, sorry, I might need to take a break after this, because I was not expecting that. And I think there's some more on like being intentional about the community members too, because like we know they're immigrants, they have a lack of understanding of so many things. So to like rely on them on a process that is going to that can heavily impact the students is, for me, doesn't sound very intentional. Like my mom wouldn't be able to tell me, you know, what a Sudanese-based story, needs to reflect, and the different things it needs to have. So to go to her, you know, for approval wouldn't make sense for me. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it. And yeah, I would like for you to give me more information on that book and what it's being used for. Because I just don't think any writing from people that aren't those people that are being talked about in the book should not be allowed, whether, you know, it has the consent of a community or not. And then to add on to I guess what I was talking about is, we are talking about, like, obviously ELL hosts marginalized students, who, like, a lot of times the traditional education process is not created for them. And it a lot of times isn't created for them to be successful. So I'm wondering, like, a lot of the research I saw and like was able to look up was like centers white women, or like the writers are white women, or they centered I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that identity, but I think we all know that there's really a narrow concept within that. They don't have the capacity to see beyond or like specific to ELL students, like I don't see how a podcast about all children is going to inform us about how we need to create curriculum specifically for ELL students. So I'm wondering, like, what is the intentionality of finding represented research or research that accurately represents the demographic of those students or the demographic of the ELL students that you're working with? And I guess specifically like by Black and Brown educators who a lot of times are able to recognize the different dynamics that these students are going through within the school system.
I mean, I so appreciate your feedback, Nylat, and understand your point about you want to take a pause. So I'm, and happy to follow up as I'm hearing you say you would want to do to learn more about that. And I think as far as the research, I would like to ask, so we collaborate with the language development team. And so which is part of what factors into how we're critiquing curriculum and trying to make choices. As far as authorship of that research is part of what I think I'm hearing you ask about. And who are those authors and what are their identities? I'd need to follow up with you to kind of look at that. But I think, I guess what I would say just in full transparency is I know that we're looking, for example, at research about how to make curriculum accessible to all learners and in particular multilingual learners. But I will say, I don't know if I know that we've then scrutinized all of the different researchers as far in terms of their identities. And so I'm hearing that as a question, but also as feedback for us. And so that's my honest answer to that, but I can definitely follow up with you on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I think for me, it's more about being intentional in getting a perspective that represents all rather than a perspective that might leave out all, if that makes sense, or not all, but some. So trying to be intentional in looking at learning that can reflect all, or has somebody that has can intentionally represent that demographic, if not that demographic, but has some of those components so that they're able to bring that up. Because a lot of times is when people don't have a lot of experiences with marginalized communities, they're unable to resource their experience and make it a part of their work or whatever they're doing, whether it's a program or a curriculum. They don't a lot of times hone in on that specific experience. So if you're able to find research that has some of that or that's being written by people within those demographics, a lot of times they're able to touch on that experience and include it. It's more, or that's what I'm saying, more of if there's intentionality of that, then we might be able to better represent.
Yeah. And I would just, I do understand what you're saying. And I think I would say that we're trying to be intentional, but I would not say that we're, fully where I'm hearing where you're pushing us to be, that we need to be. I think that, and that brings up how all of this work is interconnected. We need a more diverse team. When we got here, 97% of our teachers were white. And so then we're really trying to look outside of ourselves for diverse perspectives and to make sure we're really grounded in people's kind of different identities, or who's, the example of the book. So we're, that example Jesse gave, I really would love if at any point you'd be open to follow up on learning more about that, because that was an attempt to be pretty intentional. So I'd like to learn more from you about your feedback and critique of that. And then, I'll tell you guys something. So I've been connected to the heads of curriculum, some of the top curricula people, whatever you call it, in the kind of national market. And I've been able to talk with them, and I have been dismayed by where the curriculum market is as it pertains to alignment to what we're trying to do with an anti-racist, equity-oriented curriculum. When I'm talking to people, they're telling us the questions we're asking, what we're trying to do is far beyond where the curriculum market is. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm hearing feedback from you, Nyla, like you're giving, and I'm like, feeling like, oh my gosh, we have so far to go. And then people are kind of telling us that they're writing to the middle of the country. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. How is a district supposed to do this if I'm talking to people and they're and I was like, it's disturbing, but they're trying to cater to people that are pushing back against, like CRT and things like that. And so that's where, we're like, we can't, can you write an entire literacy curriculum? We're doing that with Wabanaki Studies, and it's immense. But I think I just want to be honest about, we're trying to be intentional. We're also working with these forces. I'm not making it as an excuse, but I've been not surprised, but definitely struck by that when I've had access to be interacting with these folks that are kind of heads of all these different curriculum groups, if that makes any sense. So, but if you'd be open to a follow-up, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely want to know, what that process looked like. And I'm happy to, you guys know, I organize for a job. So a lot of this is what I do, or am trying to encourage people to do. So I think there is also understanding the deeper, and I say assimilation mostly because that's the process folks are going, but a lot of times there's only so much to where you can only understand the complexities of certain things. And with history, we know a lot of a lot of African history is written by white people, or through the lens of white people. So I think there needs to be more effort in trying to find Black authors specifically in that state, but more of also looking at, if we can't find resources in that, then it's okay. But to rather find resources that weren't written by those people, or where those people are not writing about themselves. Sometimes we just have to not do it, or not, or maybe, do something else. But yeah, I think I just need to really calm, I'm just overwhelmed right now. So I'm just going to take some time to myself, if that's okay.
Thank you. Is it, yes. And I'll, if I can follow up, you can let me know if it's too soon or whatever, but yes, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Member Bilio. And just appreciate the emotional labor that takes, and totally appreciate the needing to take a minute. So thank you, Member Bilio. And I know Member Opperman noted a question here that she understood my request to maybe put that one aside for now, or follow up about it, just so I don't know if Superintendent Townsend, if we wanted to focus on one of the pieces, because there was so much richness going on with the curriculum piece, we kind of went over the time, or just get through what we can. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that'll be okay. Yeah, no, meaningful conversation. And there isn't, just to say, there is an urgency to act tonight. So I can kind of frame that.
I wasn't sure on one of those. Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much, staff,
and for all shifted a little bit. And sorry, I think I'm having internet issues.
So thanks, Cindy and Jesse. Appreciate you. Are we cutting out, or what's happening with the?
I don't know. I kept coming back, and looked like I was frozen. I don't know. I looked like I was frozen in various positions.
Yeah. You didn't look frozen to me. I didn't see it. So
okay, good. I don't know. I also. For not that there are any attendees, but I was not texting people around gift cards. Apparently I got spammed, and all sorts of people are receiving text messages asking me to buy, that I was asking them to buy gift cards. So I'm saying publicly for the record here that was not me, but anyway. So a weird afternoon. So the context is we're going through just kind of a regular routine, kind of compliance audit from DOE around our McKinsey-Vento programs, kind of, and I think it's actually prompting a good opportunity here. So there were two things initially when our McKinsey-Vento coordinator or liaison, whose name is Priscilla Bittencourt, and it might be great in a subsequent meeting to invite her back into this conversation, and Grace as well, but they flagged a couple things around policy stuff that's part of the review. So one was the kind of discussion around truancy. She went initially to truancy because there's legislation that students can't be subject to truancy proceedings because of, being, homeless or experiencing housing instability. So as we dug into that, we realized that language, we do have the appropriate language. It actually sits not in the truancy policy because that's the procedure, but it sits in our compulsory school attendance policy as one of the criterias of excused absence, right? Which is the state expectation and is consistent with kind of the state policy language. So we're actually good and in good shape that our policies kind of account for that, right? That students who are experiencing housing instability, right? That can't be a reason for which we're then effectively, in my language, piling on, right? With truancy and so forth. So that's why that one's not on the agenda anymore, because we actually, as we dug into that, we're actually in good shape from that perspective and appropriate and compliant. But what did come up is the other policy that we have, which is a required policy, it had been called admission of homeless students, was what the current version of our policy is. But the last time that had been reviewed was 2007. And so there have been some shifts. I think it reflects kind of the procedure that's attached now. So there's an expectation from the compliance perspective to kind of review the policy every 5 years or so. So obviously we're well beyond that. But I think given everything we're experiencing as well, kind of a good opportunity for us to kind of pause and take stock a little bit of, of the policy and are there, in particularly the procedure. The policy itself is not super substantive, right? So that's one of the shifts that ultimately we would adopt in some fashion, which is kind of the policy is just kind of a statement of kind of principle, right, in terms of how we should operate. And then the procedure now of that offers the definitions and kind of process that we would go through. So I might invite us. So we don't need to take action on anything tonight. There's no urgency by a specific deadline to have done this, but just to kind of initiate and be engaged in this process. So I think for tonight, given our time, I'd be curious, for us to kind of take a look at both the policy and at the procedure. And to kind of surface, are there questions or wonderings, things we might want to get a little perspective or input on to kind of bring back, to a subsequent meeting to kind of refine, in terms of language of how we might want to move forward with kind of the update or adoption of this kind of new policy and procedure framework. Around it. So I think, so that's what I'd say is kind of useful for tonight, is to just give you guys a chance to review really the model policy. So what I've attached to board docs, I've attached our existing policy, and that's, called the admission of homeless students. It is substantially similar to what's the draft procedure. So I think it makes the most sense to kind of focus on the draft policy and the draft procedure documents. Those were modeled, from MSMA, samples. So as kind of a starting point, of which ours, our kind of now old one, is pretty similar to. So I'd say unless there's kind of immediate questions just about the context of it all, I can be quiet for a minute while people take a chance to review, and we can see what kind of questions or wonderings come up that might help inform follow-up we would do and bring back to subsequent committee meeting. Yeah, Dr. Opperman.
Clarification on which ones to look at.
Yeah.
Because I read all of them. And so the admission one is not part of what we want to look at anymore.
Right. Yeah, that's what
JFR. There's an R. The ones with R after it, correct, is what you want to look at?
Yep. The one with R is now kind of what would be proposed as the procedure. Okay. And that is similar to what our existing policy is. Right. That one that's the admission of homeless students, that was the title of what is currently in our policy book. That's currently the adopted policy. So there's a retitling of it. So that's the JFABD, Education of Homeless Students draft. That's the policy. And then the one with the R is where there's more substantive stuff.
Well, I think that the new one is a bit better, because the first thing that I think it's gone now that struck me was the term throwaway kids, throwaway children or students in the old one, which kind of went like, oh, I don't like that. Just as a term for homeless kids, unaccompanied homeless children is what it was, students.
Yeah.
That struck me as very, very inappropriate. But the other one there are two other ones. The one that again, I'll have to look at it again. It may be different. Is the immunization piece, that it just said they can come in without immunization, which isn't a problem. But is there and again, if this is a procedural type thing, you have to figure out how long until they become immunized. I'd have to look at again the second one to see if it's in there. I don't think it was. And the other one is a how long as well. And with transportation, when a student is living in a homeless student living in Portland is trying to maintain his or her education out at Bonnie Eagle, which was their old school, their school of origin or whatever, we transport them. And again, for how long? And I'm not saying it has to be rigid, but I'm just wondering we're going to do this for how many years is my concern, not as days or, how many months. So those are the two things, immunization and transportation, that I saw. Otherwise it looks fine.
Yeah. And I think, and we'll verify, but I think on the transportation question, it's through the end of the current school year.
Okay.
But we can verify.
If they start in October, and that seems, it just seems, I'm thinking, again, I'm on that other hat, the dollar hat and the hard having bus drivers and that sort of thing. So just a thought.
Yeah. And that is where we are utilizing some of the contracted, the additional routes to be able to kind of meet that obligation. And we do some sharing, with some of the districts. There's some collaboration across districts.
The bus drivers explained that to me, they were very good about it.
Yeah.
And those are my things. I don't know if somebody else needs to look it over and say something.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Opperman.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just reading Superintendent Townsend over the public notice part, because I wasn't sure I totally understood that. So I'm just peeking at it again to see what my question is, because I just didn't know that was the thing. Let's see.
While you're figuring out, could I ask a question? This is just a curiosity, and just like I haven't been in enough of these meetings to know how we think about this, but I'm just curious about person first language versus a homeless student. Just it just sounds permanent, and we know it's probably not. So I wondered if there's any way we can consider that. That would make me.
Yep. No, those are definitely the kinds of amendments. We've in each of these, and analogous maybe is really being intentional about the pronoun usage, right, throughout our policies, right. So I think person first language was consistent with how we would want to talk about it.
So I keep losing this.
What you were thinking about, Laura, I know the section was saying, where do you post it? That you post it in places where homeless people might be. I think was that section on public announcement. Didn't say newspaper, I don't believe, or anything like that. Is that what you're talking about, that section? Maybe?
Yeah, let me just go back to the part where, let's see. Record keeping. Okay. Providing all required notices to be shared. Yeah, that part makes sense. The homeless liaison will identify the appropriate method to distribute and post information, so it's readily accessible. That makes sense. But it was the part about responsible for providing all required notices and any other information to be shared or distributed with parents. So is that just like, I just didn't get what the public notice, is that just, enrollment paperwork for being becoming a enrolled student? Is that what that means? I just didn't know what the.
Yeah, I mean, and part of what I'm understanding, and a question I might have as well, is like, what are the required notices? What's
that's what I just didn't know if I was missing.
Needs to be posted. So, yeah, okay.
The public notice, that part, what that Julie mentioned, that makes sense to me. It was just that piece I didn't quite get what that was, but
we can clarify.
But yeah, I also like the Chair Lentz's comment about the specific language. I agree that we could probably have more thoughtful language.
Yeah.
I think I had one other question about the last part, homeless student liaison. So Erin, is anything different, like in the description of what the homeless student liaison does? Is it really just like being explicit in the language? Is there anything different that's being added or changed about that part that just kind of lays out what their role is?
I mean, it was a little hard to tell compared to the higher version. Let's see. I haven't done a full analysis of it, to be honest.
Because I just glanced at the other one and I'm at this one now. So I just didn't know if you thought there was a substantial change there. And just if there was, I was curious if the role, if there had been any change. I was just wondering. Okay.
It seemed to be just more of a focus on the person having to do all that thing. All of that.
Just like explicitly saying what they're required to do. Yeah.
That's what it's, other than, not intent, but that's what it felt like. I was trying to see where they fit, between the two of them.
Okay.
But I could be wrong.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that was my only question, is just I was curious if it was anything about the actual role, but maybe it's just laying out explicitly what the law requires and what their role, what their responsibilities are to the family and to this, the communication between family and school. So, So was there anything, so you got a couple questions to go back to. Is there anything else for us to do?
No, I don't think so. I think we can, I can bring back some updates around that and any input from, Priscilla and so forth. And then, we can move it forward for just adoption to kind of make it more current than what's on the books currently.
Okay. Sounds good.
Right.
If we're wrapped up with that, can I ask my old question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there'll be a vote on this at the next meeting. Is that what you're hoping for?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'd propose. Yeah, is that we kind of take action to recommend it to the board, if everybody's comfortable with it at the next meeting.
So can you just remind me, Erin, with process? So if you did would you just put it in the agenda so we could look at it, before the meeting? And so, assuming that you want us to vote on it, that if we had questions to bring from looking at it to the meeting, we could do that. Okay.
Yep.
Our meeting is pretty late, isn't it?
What's that?
Our next meeting is fairly late.
We need to reschedule because it's on a finance committee. Yeah.
Yes. I think it's my, I don't know which committee it is, but it may be based. But I cannot show up. I mean, you guys can have a meeting without me.
I don't think the day we have is going to work at all. So it's just hard to have a consistent one during budget time. So,
Indeed.
Julie, were you saying you had a question about previous?
It was about literacy, and it was a question because I spoke to a literacy coach, a really nice woman at Roe. Nice conversation, and we have, with the need to help so many people with literacy and reading, I says about volunteers for that kind of a position, and she used to train volunteers in one of her previous schools, and literally had like a day where 20 people were there and working. And I don't know if that fits into this new model at all, but if there were some concerted effort to get enough people to really support the reading with the kids, helping the kids practice, particularly in the elementary.
Yeah,
at any age, like you would with an adult person.
Yeah, there's people like when people sit and read with students, and we've had like the foster grandparents program that has done that, things like that.
Yeah, but I mean, literally. I mean, she said, "Oh, I had a busload of elderly people they came by."
That's probably foster grandparents. Yeah.
Although I came from I don't know which housing place, but they all came together and they all sat down at one time. But she trained them. She said, "I have to train them," and so it's that kind of a thing that, I'm just looking at how do we maximize what we can for these students, and within our resources. Yeah. So that was, I mentioned something to Tina Mickelson about it, and we were going to get together, but moving beyond that as a almost a PR thing. But that's what I wanted to bring up just as an important idea.
Yeah, I mean, schools do different things like that. And we have had the programs, with the pandemic, a lot of that stuff went away for a while, but then we've had other kinds of reading support programs. I would say right now, I think it's more school specific. And so I would have to follow up to figure out where people are at with building that back in. And yeah, it's awesome. And I think we've been really focused on, we need to get strong core instruction. So then, cause it's, as a base and these additional supports. And so tonight, what I was talking about is that core, but absolutely having those additional pieces.
But I just, somewhere I had to bring it up.
Yeah. Great.
I think the thing that I'm most familiar with at Portland High, they've been doing, and again, it got a little funky during the pandemic, but they've had a math partnership for ninth graders around algebra, I believe with Unum, but an organization that's kind of an intermediary that, they bust them over. It's a specific time during the day, get trained, and has been, really positive.
Yeah,
that's that kind of community involvement, but very, very organized, not sloppy.
Yeah.
So excellent. Thank you. That's all.
All right. Thank you. Was there anything else before we wrap up? I did want to just ask about next meeting for a minute. Anything else, though, more substantive before we finish up? Okay. So I did note, our meeting was scheduled for the 28th, Tuesday the 28th. I wondered would it work to bump it up a little, because the joint city school finance meeting's at 6:30. So I don't know if we want to do a meeting before that, but it's just so hard to find.
What date did you say again, Nora?
This is Tuesday the 28th. We have a joint city and school finance committee meeting at 6:30 that evening.
In March again?
Yeah.
I don't think we need to do two of these meetings in March.
Oh, okay, but this was the February. So do you think we should? Yeah, this
I see what you mean.
Scheduled for Monday. We can try to go into April. Maybe we'll just do some email. I think I suggested, because there weren't very many meetings, but you just follow up with try to find some April, kind of after the flurry of the budget. Do you think that would be okay?
I would personally recommend that. I think just with Aaron and me not really having fully backfilled positions, so we're doing double duty and the budget meetings. I don't feel like there's anything urgent that we have to do this to justify too. Oh, maybe there is. Aaron, go ahead and do it.
Well, no, we had talked a little bit, and I don't know, I don't have it in front of me right now, of engaging with Representative Brennan kind of through the context of this committee.
Yeah. And he did say that another Thursday, if we wanted to propose any other Thursdays upcoming, that he could, probably make time on a Thursday. So if you wanted to, but I was having a hard time finding some other Thursdays that didn't have other meetings too. So we can start an email back and forth about that. But should we just say we're going to do April? We'll do April for the next committee meeting, and we'll figure out some dates. Does that sound good?
So, sorry, just to add one complication. So the updated policy BDE does not define legislation as part of this committee anymore. So I think that is like something that we have to do in this body of, I think we have to, I would like to understand the decision-making behind that. I don't have that context, and then decide kind of like how we move forward. Does that come back to this committee? What happens? I think it's a miss to not have it held within some committee on the board.
Okay.
Did we ever have a legislative committee?
It used to be part of this.
Yeah, well, and before, and this maybe everybody's familiar. I mean, Aura, certainly you were on the board. It used to be policy and curriculum were separate committees, and so it was the policy and legislative committee is what it was called at one point. Yeah,
it really would be good to have something. I mean, I've spoken with Senator Brennan, and I mean, he's very much wants to engage and have all of the people engaged with the school board. He's mentioned that all of the representatives, legislative group for Portland meet with the city council regularly. And he said whether we joined in on that.
I think Chair Lentz is part of that. Yeah.
Are you now?
Yeah. So it sounds like we want to collaborate. It's just figuring out if this is the appropriate, forum to do that, right? So maybe we'll circle back about how to engage him, but it sounds like he would like to make time too. So let's just come back to that. And it's just you and I, Julia, as the official members. So if you would like to motion for us to adjourn.
And I second.
I don't know. Or can you officially second, Sarah? Thank you. Superintendent, so much. Okay. Have a great night.
Good night. Bye. Yep. Good night.